Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for the invitation and for the kind introduction. I observe the behavior like in the lectures, everybody sitting in the back and nobody in front. So if you want to see more, you are invited, warm invited to move in front to see better the slides. I will talk about digital humanism, but then I liked so much the motto of your conference, which is reflection about the web, AI, and society. So I took this as a subtitle of my talk, and this is in essence what I will do. It will be a rather political talk. It will not be very technical, but I hope you will like it. I'm starting with this first frame, what a nonsense. So I hope when you stand up, you won't say that's what a nonsense. But this was back in history. This was in 1994, the reaction of the audience at the first conference we had on IT and tourism and the web in Innsbruck. There were several hundred participants, not only from, let's say, industry, but also from academia. And the people could not really understand what we're talking about. We were talking about electronic markets. Beat Schmidt, who was one of the forerunners in this field. We had Larry Press from the University of California, LA, talking about digital agents, and people were not understanding what is, and we had some guy talking about digital money. So this was the reaction, and even some of those left the conference, even if they had paid let's say, the entrance fee. What we see today is this, and this is a photograph from a metro all over the world. You can see it. I made a similar photo in Vienna. And you see them looking at their mobile phones. They don't even use the phones for calling. They are reading. So we have no newspaper. They are reading and gaming. So this is what we see today. And this is 30 years, not even 30 years, where we changed. We have this general purpose device, which is in essence a little computer, which we did not believe some 20 years ago. What we really have is this, let's say, physical digital world. There is no separation. We have it as a public good where participation is mandatory. We even have an Austrian politician who says we have to have the right for, let's say, analog life. This is a statement of a politician in Austria today, observing that some groups are falling out of this digital world. What this really is, we have it, the web as an infrastructure, as a global infrastructure, the internet and the web, and we have it as the operating system of our society. It would not work without that. It's really influencing every part, and this happened in just 30 years, what we call digital transformation. Digital transformation in the sense as a socio-economic technical process. I think the most important thing for computer scientists, and I'm coming from computer science, is to understand this is also a socio-economic, cultural change. It's not only a technical, and you cannot reduce it to pure technology. And AI is something as the last step we observe today, we are witnessing, but it will not be the real last step. This is something which is really astonishing. I was in Vietnam and Macau at the conference, and then I was in this hotel. And after my visit to Vietnam, so this is 1 week old, I got this mail by the hotel proposing me a hotel review written by GPT. Okay, so they already sent me my review, asking if I could use this review, obviously in a, let's say, sentiment analysis, very positive terms. You won't find any negative annotations here. And then they offer at the bottom here where I can put it and cut and paste. The next step is that some AI is reading it, no? It's not only writing, but this is what's happening. So this is what we are experiencing the AI as the next step. We have surprising performances. We have GPT-4 outperforming human performance in specific tests. We have scientists are even surprised, saying what they did not expect that this would happen. But I really would like to underline what very few are talking today is that we are participants in a worldwide experiment where nobody was asked. And if you come from academia, and all of you come from academia, and you do experiments with your students on individual behavior, you have to pass several committees and boards, and you have to sign, and students have to agree. Nobody was asked. Okay, this was something which happened. And the promise is really to have a flexible tool which can support humans. This is somehow the promise. And I have here two examples, thanks also to Daron Acemoglu, who pointed me to these two examples where real research shows that human users can be enriched and can be supported, and their creativity can be supported by using those tools, especially those who are not so well prepared. So it has something like a democratic, even empowering feature. The issue is, in essence, on AI, whether we will use it augmenting humans or whether we will use it to substitute or automation. Obviously, it will be both, but it's really, this is not a technical decision. This is socio-economic political decision. AI is what I call GPT, so it's not generative pre-trained transformer. It's a general purpose technology. You can use it for everything, nearly everything, where you can somehow automate or augment or support human thinking and human reasoning. And there are some promises related to that, which I do not believe. This is some PricewaterhouseCoopers and say we will have an increase of a yearly 1.2%. So I don't know how they calculate this, but there are also these super optimistic statements. What we have is a discussion on AI, where we have on one side this critic on this anthropomorphic notion of artificial intelligence, which I somehow share. And we have this dystopic and, on the other side, utopian approach. And what is important is that we, especially sitting here in the North and the West, we should acknowledge that the world doesn't see this completely in this way. If you go to the global South, it's much more optimistic point of view that you can use it for, let's say, enriching a population, for more participation and things like that. So this pessimistic view, which is, let's say, the predominant view a little bit in the western and northern part, is not shared all over. So you have different positions like that. Some of my colleagues at TU Vienna, especially the old AI guys coming from logic, they say, okay, this is a hype which will pass. And we had many hypes in computer science. And there are signs of that. For example, the number of users is not increasing as it was before and things like that. Then we have those who are really super optimistic and they're really amazed. And then we have also these existential threat warners who say with AGI, artificial and general intelligence, there is the threat of human extinction. So this is something which is really coming. There was this Future of Life Institute letter calling for a moratorium, and this was somehow this statement. In essence, it's also related to this post-humanism view, where you are somehow, you have this notion of singularity, where one moment in time, let's say the artificial intelligence is surpassing the human capacity, and then we have to watch what is happening. And there's something like this separation of mind and body. If you read some work of Kurzweil or Tegmark, you have the separation of mind and body, which is somehow a religious concept. And they're really referring to that and mind uploading and things like that. But we should be aware, the cloud computing is something we already upload a lot of our, let's say, intellectual capacity. So then we have those who say this is a hype. The real threat is somewhere else. You know, Whittaker from Signal and those. And they say the real threat is surveillance. And then you have somehow cautious ones who say, okay, there's a huge potential, but we also have to look. And there were several answers how to react, from a moratorium which nobody followed, up to public initiatives where we should have something like a CERN, you know, this nuclear power research center in Switzerland, and something similar here. And the funny thing is, I think if I would ask you what is AI, I would have 10 different definitions. It's something like, is it every complex systems? I'm also coming from recommender systems, and as a recommender guy, I never thought that I do AI. But with the rise of AI discussion and also the funding going into AI, also the recommender systems community says, no, oh, we are doing AI. So is it more like a brand for related technologies, which is somehow mimicking, simulating human thinking and human behavior? There is an English computer scientist who is also a historian, Thomas Haig, who is showing very well this brand development of the notion of artificial intelligence, which is also heavily related with economic interest. So it's really at the end, most of the time when we talk about AI, it's the discussion, what is human intelligence? It's coming up, what is the human? What is the essence of a human? What is the essence of consciousness and things like that, when we talk about this machine part. I think the most precise definition is when you go to the methods, to the paradigm. And there we have two. One is the logic, the symbolic one, and the other one is the data-driven one. And for a very long time, the symbolic one was the predominant, where you can describe the world a priori by a set of rules, facts, and you can deduce new knowledge by using your inference rules. And the other one is the learning approach, which is based on data, and on learning and deep learning. And currently we have this paradigm shift, going from the symbolic to the, let's say, the machine learning part, and I'm coming from a faculty which is very strong in logic, and my colleagues from the symbolic world have to learn that statistics might be a useful discipline, at least to use it, okay? What is important is, and this was already mentioned today by Noshia, that this machine learning is heavily related with the web, with the availability of a huge set of data, but also by increasing computer power, both from computing capacity as well from storage capacity. And we also have, let's say, methodological advances with this transformer model where you can contextualize the last things which you have learned. Important is, if you look at the history of AI, you all know the first conference, 56 in Dartmouth, with all the famous guys like McCarthy, Simon, and so on. There was also a counter-proposal for the notion, which was cybernetics, by Werthner. He was coming from the analog world with this, let's say, control theory approach, where you have more this, let's say, systems approach to artificial intelligence, mimicking somehow the, let's say, the back propagation and all those things. But also due to, let's say, marketing reasons, at least this is what is written, the other notion was chosen. I'm not going to extend much on these risks, what we see, and can observe, you know them. It's a story machine, it's not a truth machine, this is related with hallucination. It's a black box, so you do not know by which result is coming out. And this is really hindering application in several domains where you need to know why decisions are taken. You have the bias issue, which is always related with data. And if you have a data-based approach, you have a bias. You need to have some normative approaches, but this is already a political decision which norms you are influencing. And then you have things which is discussed here with misinformation, influencing political discourse. You could add surveillance and things like that. I'm grateful to Andrew, to Edward Lee, to pointing at this distinction which goes back to Daniel Kahneman, you know him, with fast and slow thinking, where you have the two parts of our brain. One is the logic thinking, the logic slow one, and one is the intuitive part, where you have very fast decisions which you posteriori sometimes rationalized, but decisions are taken very fast and unconscious. And we need them because otherwise we could not survive. We have to take decision every moment, and we could not have a rational process of that. And these two parts are somehow referring to the logic, symbolic approach to AI, and the machine learning, deep learning. A final guy who is important for us is Simon, who is referring to bounded rationality, and correctly also saying, don't we expect too much from machines? Also, humans are not always rational behavior. This goes back to Kahneman. We have problem to, let's say, reason with a huge number of facts, to have to reason with a long chain of logical arguments. And we are not capable of having many different options at the same time in our head. So also the human has this limited capacity, and I think this is something we should also take into consideration, especially when we go into this direction of augmenting human capacity, and this I think is a chance. Final slide to AI. It's really the entire knowledge in GPT-4 are 175 billions of parameters. There's no model behind. You could take the software, but important are these parameters. It's enormous mass of parameters, which is really trained and things like that. And this is, let's say, in some sense knowledge, but it's not explicit. There is no model behind that. And it's interesting that Google, using machine learning, has better weather forecasts than the old weather models we have developed over centuries. They are more precise, they use less computing power, and make better predictions. There's no model behind that. What is interesting, also we have all those different investments and growth. The final business model is still open. The final business model in AI is still discussed. And it's especially in discussion with the classical web search. What is the relation to web search? There are several experiments coming up. But is it a backbone? Will it be something like an app store, an intelligent app store they will provide, and things like that? There are several experiments. It's not clear the final business model. The landscape is highly concentrated. It's not the death of big tech, on the contrary. They are the key players in different areas like development of LLMs, in the cloud business, in the service business. These are the big tech. They have learned from the past of innovation theory that old players, if they are too lazy, they can easily go out of the market, which is not the case here. You have most of the models come from industry. It's highly concentrated in the Western world, plus China. And we have something like a colonial division of labor. Not only, also with respect to the raw material we need, okay? But money is made in the Northwest. And university is lagging behind. I have this last line here, which I find very interesting. This is a number of papers at leading AI conferences, machine learning conferences. It's not counted the impact of the paper with indices, but the number of authors, the lead author from which part of the world. And it's interesting, we have a quarter distribution, US, Europe, China, and the rest of the world. If you go to the patent and the startups, it looks differently. So we have something where the university has a problem. I just discussed previously with Steffen how many GPUs he has. Not personally, but the university, and we were laughing about it. So universities are lagging behind. And we have research results, and we have good results and surprising results without a model. So do we go into a science without university and science without a model? These are points to discuss maybe afterwards, okay? Because I think this is really a paradigmatic shift. We have to be aware of that. Science is based on models. Science is based on abstraction. Here it's abstracted in 170 billion parameters. You have no causal model. okay? Which is important for us to explain the world and to predict some things. Behind that is computer science. I make it very fast. So I reflect on these things. It's a very young discipline, but by some guys, this is an Egyptologist says it's the Latin of today. He doesn't understand what computer science is, but it's good that somebody from outside says it and it's not me. Or you. It's fundamental. It's general purpose. It can influence everything and it can be pervasive. It's the methods, the paradigms, and the artifacts. It's everything together. Okay? And we always have in the history of computer science, we have these two different views. Problem solving, I just used von Neumann here, with his EIS computer at Princeton, where they did weather simulation, illegally during night when nobody looked at it. And at the same time, we have computer science as a tool to understand human reasoning. When you look at Turing and his work. Having said this classification is already wrong because also Neumann was thinking about the general machine which can reproduce its successors. So all the classifications somehow are spurious. We see this change from a single computer to a worldwide machine, which is connected, pervasive, sometimes disappearing, learning, adaptive. All those adjectives you can use, and they are, to some extent, they are true. And from a technical perspective, we have systems consisting of different parts, even human systems or organizations. But look at technical systems. And we have software which is somehow controlling those systems or that's somehow monitoring those systems. And we are increasingly delegating work to software, be it in human organizations, be it in machines. Look at the car. Look at the electric car. We had a long discussion yesterday of the problems of German car industry, which did not understand really the power of software in contrast to the Chinese, who built the car around the software, not the other way around. Also Tesla does it like that. So we are increasingly delegating to software, virtualization, because it's cheaper, but what it means, really means, that everything touched by software becomes a computer. And if you link this with IoT, then we really have this worldwide computing machine where we are permanently connected in the positive or negative sense. We have digital divide. I really want to mention this because it really also is an opportunity for humans. Obviously, it's more than technology, the web. And I like very much this up here. In Vilnius, you have separate lanes for those going with the bike and those reading the mobile phones. And you have to have different lines because also they have the earphones. And so you have it differently. Okay, this other one is in Germany. You have the street marks, the lamps, on the road. So that when the kids come out, they don't look up. So they see it in front of them. So it's changing our environment, our physics. It will change our city radically. We will have a decrease of supermarkets. There is no need for so many supermarkets. I think this is something in our market and marketing development, it's an intermediate position. What? This is wrong. Sorry. Short to the web. This is based on a famous paper by Moshe Wadi. You know him. He is one of the best-known computer scientists. He is also part of the Digital Humanism initiative, who really describes that in a paper which is called "Did the Hippies Destroy the Internet?" Because what was really happening is that when the web and the internet was created, it was based on free information sharing. A huge increase, participation, But to monetize, to sustain it, you need a business model, which was the newspaper model, which was based on personalization and recommendation, which is really the advantage of the web, that it's a one-to-one communication, personalized and recommended. And this is beyond all classical media. This is the problem classical media has. And they can immediately work on the data. And when you go to recommender, and I talk now about collaborative recommender, which is the predominant technology in recommender systems, individual freedom is a fiction, because what they do, what they see, what they get is defined by an entrance in a similarity matrix, a huge similarity matrix. We look, what does your neighbor do, and maybe you do the same thing. And having 1 million of neighbor, it's very precise to estimate what you will do, okay? So this is this individual freedom we have. We want to be free. Nearly something like a postmodern approach to that is not really the case. So we have this, we pay with the data, which is well known, our data. And you know this work by Zuboff with the surveillance. We changed from a citizen to a consumer. At the initial beginning, this was a citizen's participatory approach. Now we are consumers, we are buying. This is what we have to do. And somehow we are the user, the product, and the producer. Okay, because we use it. By using it, we become the product which is negotiated, sold to somebody. And we are producing the data, the interaction, the behavioral data, which is at the end it's sold. So it's something like an economic perpetuum mobile. It's really scaling. From an economic perspective, it's really going from IT supports the business to IT is the business. Today, every company has to be IT somehow in some sense. It was based on efficiency and money. It was not based on resilience and sustainability. There's one big example in computer science, which is based on resilience. The internet architecture is a resilient architecture, because you can attack it and it will not break down. Other architectures are not so well designed. We have an informatization of all the different relationships. I just mentioned here the value chains, which means ICT is the basis of our interaction, which is also basis for globalization. It's outsourcing. I still remember when there was a bank, I could go there and make some unannounced visit to a bank and change money. This is not possible anymore. When you go to the airplane, you have to do it yourself. And it's privatization. It's privatized. Our data are privatized. Our private data are privatized, okay? And if you look LLMs, it's a really privatization of huge amount of data. Already Google is making a lot of money with privatized data, public data with Wikipedia. And they can use Wikipedia for this. So from a participatory desire and dream, it became also due to deregulation in the 90s in the US, it became a highly concentrated, let's say, infrastructure. I will come back to that. And even with the, let's say, the promise we had rising inequality in the last years. You can read Piketty and all those different. And there are guys like Acemoglu here really described very well that it's up to deregulation, neoliberal ideology, but also technology played its part. It's not the cause, but it's part of the game. If you look at the web business platforms, I mentioned just some of them, they're all newcomers. There is no Siemens, there's no General Electric. They're all out. They are really in the platform business, which is scaling. And if you look at the real good ones like Amazon and Google, they are independent of a concrete product. They have to care. They have the description of the product. They have the information which is important for enriching the data, for a better interaction, and for scalability. If you have to produce products, you're limited. And they can grow. They virtualize businesses and markets. And some industry may fall out. If you look at market capitalization, I had here, this is the value of businesses by market capitalization end of March 2024. You have the red ones, which are the classical platform companies. I had in italic classical AI companies coming from the hardware part with chips, which are newcomers. 1 year ago, they were not in the list. And the real interesting is when you compare this with 10 years or 12 years ago. Okay? Here you really see the difference what happened in our world. You see other industry, you see who has the power, political power, economic power. And you see that specific regions of the world are not important. This brings me to a summary. I still have 20 minutes, something like that. If they are, sorry. There's a coffee break. So we have this computer science with two parts, okay? We have it on one side, it keeps the systems running, it has a high potential, it's rich free information, research is much easier. Many of the research you are presenting is just possible because the data are publicly available. Your research would not, web science would not be possible without the availability of this data, which is mostly free, okay? You have problems, things like that, but it's available, okay? And it helps to understand the world, what's happening. It's a public good. We can use it, and we have to use it. Many things you cannot, for example, in Austria, they had now, this was the reason for this right for analog life. They are distributing money to the population due to some things, I don't know, no one, and it's only electronically available. What do you do with elderly who have no internet access? So they had to rethink that, okay? So, but it's public good. It's important for civil society and participation. Still, the Sardines is a group of Italian, mostly female protesters against Salvini, the right wing, which were organizing themselves within Facebook 2 years ago. So Facebook is not just a hate producer, but also enabling communication. Hong Kong was social media in their, let's say, reaction to Chinese intervention. You have in South Africa, in several countries, you have really important role of the social media. It's not always one of those big five, it's also others. And you had Amazon workers organizing themselves by using social media tools. So this is somehow an irony of history, no? That they had this fight in the US for trade unions. Within Amazon, they're using these tools. And it's important for solving fundamental problems. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals in the world, we have this United Nations. And in all of them, you find some way of ICT part where computer science, from a methodological point, but also from an infrastructure point, plays a role. On the other side, we have what we have in what we see as a problem. We have concentration in the web. I showed it already. We have sovereignty of states and individuals. Maybe nobody of you knows, but the Corona app, which were used by states, which was an essential infrastructure part for, let's say, observing, monitoring, and communicating during the Corona crisis, of France and Great Britain had to be withdrawn because they were not accepted by Google and by Apple app stores. So you have to imagine, it was a public implementation, and Google and Apple did not accept, they had to withdraw it. It's the only European nuclear power, let's say, states were not able to use the App Store, the apps they developed, because the major American app stores did not accept. By the way, they had good reason that they did not accept, okay? This is the other part. But I just want to, because they were not well done. But on the other side, you see the political power, which is here. We have echo chambers, I'm not going to that. We have AI decision-making, surveillance. We have warfare, which is now, due to this Ukraine-Russian issue, a real issue, which is out of sight. We have work issue, and we have environmental things, where we contribute to the environmental disaster, and we could be a part of the solution of the environmental disaster. So Berners-Lee was already observing this. He's a visionary. He observed this already some years ago. And you can, all those things can be applied to AI. It's not only digital tools. This was the reason for our Digital Humanism workshop. Now I come to the initiative workshop in 2019, where we had over 100 participants from different disciplines, which was very important, up to anthropology and history. It was initiated when I was dean. I had an international advisory board, and we said, okay, we screwed up the world, now we have to save it, okay? So this was somehow part of this thing. And we also refer to Popper, you know, this Austrian English philosopher, which is important for the theory of science. I'm not going to explain who is on the picture. This is left for historians of computer science. Okay, what is digital humanism? We look at this interplay between ICT and humankind. We want to understand and analyze it. So web science is part of this thing. But we also want to interfere. We want to use ICT for a better world. And this is the normative part. And we try to define it by human rights and sustainability. We say that this technology is not God-given, it's not deterministic, it's not economic determinism. We are the designers, we are the agents of the world. It's up to us. There's nobody else, okay? But we have to interfere. And we are rational beings, so we have to reflect about that. We can reflect. But we also have the responsibility to do that. So this is somehow this enlightenment part, which is, we are the agents, which is very important. We as a human are the agent of this change. This differentiates us from machines, okay? We are not programmed, hopefully not, okay? And it's our responsibility. As part of that, we had the Vienna Manifesto, which was part of this workshop. This was a genius idea to write the manifesto, where we had several principles. I not go through that. And it's also a research program. And here because this is the academic part, I think we have a specific responsibility due to two facts. We are, by definition, knowledge producers. We are not skill producers. It's important. We are knowledge producers. We have to reflect on what we do and have to be aware of that. And secondly, as academics, at least coming from university, we are protected. We can speak out loudly, okay? Not in all parts of the world, but in many parts of the world. So this is also a specific responsibility we have as academics. After that, we started the initiative. It was 2019, so this was the start. Then we had organized from onward, there was the pandemic. Up to today, we had over 60 online digital humanism lectures, Tuesday at 5 p.m. We end each lecture with a piece of music. So if you want to hear good music, go to our website, and at the end we always have 2 to 3 of these music pieces, 2 minutes music piece. Everything is publicly available, so you can download the slides, you can look at the videos, you can use it, whatever you want. Don't misuse it, but it's up to you. We had lectures, some topics you have here. We had on efficiency, resiliency, on ethics, on regulation, automation work. We had Turing Prize winners presenting and things like that. So it's really a high level, let's say, series of seminars public available. with very good discussion. We always have 30 minutes of discussion. We have the manifesto now in 8 languages. We had governmental programs and initiatives. It was also used by Europe in this digital compound statement to the United Nations. We have research innovation programs and scholarship programs. These are some things what we have achieved. What the most important thing is, and this is really the most, it's an informal group of maybe 200 to 300 intellectuals worldwide, interdisciplinary, and we have no formal rules, okay? We are not formalized, this is our problem. So, no president. But it's the speakers, we have books published, we have conferences, we are active in lobbying, we were very active in supporting the European AI Act, where we contributed. We have a Digital Humanism chair sponsored by UNESCO, and we have summer school. So if some of you want to go to the summer school, we have a summer school in the first week of September. The call should be out very soon. So it's 1 week Digital Humanism. And obviously we are not alone. There are several other many international initiatives, academic, organizational. So we are one part of this moving forward. And things are changing. Due to AI, I really have to say things are changing due to AI. There's an interesting observation because 2 years after ChatGPT was announced, we have the regulation on AI in Europe. And we had 25 years on web and we had no regulation on the web. On the contrary, it was deregulated at that time. So there's a difference. So this is a major topic, political topic on these different things. We have 56 states having, in one way or the other, regulation or guidelines for AI. We have all the different international organizations. And the only hard regulations, they are soft, which are guidelines, you can follow them or not, or self-regulation by company. The only hard rules we have are Europe and China. Going back to the facts, those are the 2 which can be enforced, legally enforced. We have nothing similar in the US or other parts. And we need some global cooperation, I think, at the level of the United Nations, because this is a competitive race. And if you want to have some regulatory framework which can somehow control, you need a worldwide approach. Do I have still 5 minutes? Thank you, Steffen. He's an old friend of mine. Now, this had some reflection for computer scientists and similar one. So digital humanism in some sense is limit or eliminate the bad effects and use the good ones for a better society. And this we did. We created a so-called innovation and research roadmap, where we in essence did something. I'm not going to explain this because this is too, you can download it. You can download everything, where we said, okay, these are the critical parts and here are research questions. I'm not going into this, okay? So we really limit, and this research question from the analysis up to the design. But what I really want to show is some issues of those research questions, which has an implication. One is fairness. We want to have fair systems, but it's very hard. What is fairness? It's hard to define. For whom fair? When fair? For how long fair? What is the objective function of fairness? Who defines it? So we have to build fair systems, but nobody can tell us what it is. Is it a pure objective function of a recommender system defined by somebody? The second thing is resilience, which means somehow fault tolerance, be safe against attacks, and recover. But what does this mean? How are we really, let's say, available to bear the costs for resilient systems? You need buffers for resilient systems. You cannot squeeze out everything. What is the long-term objective of a resilient system? Who is defining that? What are the criteria? So what I really want to say with this is that we need other disciplines. This is not computer science. This is social science, humanities, political science. It's because the hard issues are not the implementational approach. Before we start coding, we should define that. Because if we only do coding and coding becomes law, then it's broken. Okay, so we did it. So as we construct social constructs, there was a very good paper in the communication of the ACM by Randall Connolly. He asked, is computer science becoming a social science? Because it has to take into consideration. So in computer science, you have the formal science and you have the engineering part, and a little bit the empirical part, okay? But he's really saying, okay, it's becoming so broad that it has to become a social science. And maybe this is an arrogant statement by a computer science, but computer science is more than computer science, okay? It's becoming much broader. And you can say, okay, this is arrogance and whatever, but last slide. When looking into the big crisis, and we live in a world of simultaneous crises, this makes it complicated. We have threats to democracy, increasing inequality. We could even mention geopolitical antagonism, climate issues. The issue is, in some sense, sometimes, especially in the crisis of democracy, there is the statement social media. But it's not the cause. Social media is not the cause. It's enabling, it's facilitating. And it's showing what's happening. The bias we have in our systems, it's a bias of the real world. So we are not the cause, but we should be aware that we are facilitators and we can increase it. And we have to be aware that we are not the solution. We are part of a solution. This is maybe not because how many of you are from computer science? So it's half of it. Having been the dean of a faculty of old computer science guys, this was already a strong statement for them. So, because they did not see that we changed the world. We need to realize by programming we abstract our intention from the final user. He has no power anymore to come back. This way of abstraction is a social construct where we have to be aware of that we change something. Also, the need for interdisciplinarity, already mentioned, and which is maybe the most controversial one, we have to engage with the public. We need to tell them. If I go back to the Vienna Manifesto, this is for politicians we wanted to have. We want to engage, we want to tell them, but this is something which is in old science, this is not part of old science. So we are changing in many different respects. Conclusions, it will not stop, okay? So AI is not the last wave. There will be next technology waves. And with this, we will have new structures, we will have new services, and we will probably have new economic players and social players. So this is part of the game, and we have to be permanent. We have, in some sense, we have to steer and guide the wave. We are, let's say, we need this disciplinarity, and we are becoming this, we have to be aware, the guiding principles. But we should not reduce ourselves to skills. This is very often I see when I read European papers, skills. It's not the issue, it's knowledge. It's the knowledge about the things. It's the knowledge about the knowledge. We really have to be at that. We have to understand what's happening, not just doing. This development is not deterministic. It's not given, God-given, independent whether there is God or not God. But there is no extraterrestrial being defining how it should happen. It's up to us. We really should not look at the money and efficiency. Let's look at the people and the society and the nature. And this is the last thing. It's a political issue. This is really something where digital humanism is really saying we need the broad view, but at the end it's up from research to political intervention. And you can read this in these 2 books we have published, which are open access. You can download them on Springer. We had the one 450,000 downloads, the other one 260,000 downloads or something. So you really use it. And the introduction, we will translate and transform to a teaching book for high schools. I thank you for your attention.